The story we are about to present is entitled A Fish, Flies, Dogs, and Women, a literary piece written by Timothy R. Montes. The story begins from the perspective of a woman telling her life story to Mana Biben and how a single day managed to change her life forever. It went back 5 years prior to the interview, and back then, the world was not kind to the woman, as she faced abuse from her spouse and she still had to provide for her children as her husband stopped giving her money from his copra harvest. She struggled to live with the responsibility shouldered upon her, and despite the fact that she may hear the jeers and laughter of her neighbors, she still continued to work as a humble fish vendor, selling from house to house just to beat the competition in the marketplace. The fish vendor found herself at the rusty gate of Attorney Sabate's house, and despite the presence of large German shepherds near it, she was still determined to sell all of the fish she had, no matter the cost. She started to shout aloud, "Fresh fish! Fresh fish!" And as the dogs began closing in on her, a figure emerged from the veranda. It was not Attorney Sabate, but rather his daughter, Angelica Discreciada, with a baby in her hands. And so, the beautiful woman acknowledged the presence of the fish vendor, who was now surrounded by the German shepherds. But rather than asking for help, the vendor asked if Angelica would like to purchase a fish. Sadly, Angelica refused as neither of her parents was present and she did not possess any money. The vendor then asked if she could see the baby that the woman was holding. The woman smiled and granted her request. The vendor dropped the basket of fishes and approached the baby. As she laid her eyes on the baby, she began to see a bit of herself in Angelica, as she too carried the weight of being a mother on her shoulders. As the vendor started to reflect upon their similar situations, she noticed that the contents of her basket were now being taken by the dogs. Fueled with the fear and adrenaline, she sprung into action as she fought off the 5 dogs that had scrambled to her basket. She screamed, "PestengYawamo!" as she managed to drive them off. As the vendor recovered herself, the girl on the veranda began apologizing for not being able to help her. The vendor shouted at her and told her not to apologize, as she should not be sorry for things that were out of her control. And then she told Angelica to never be ashamed of her young little baby girl and of herself, as no one in this town will ever be able to understand the pain of being a mother. The vendor went on her way and began to shout out angrily, "Fresh fish! Fish!" After telling these events, the protagonist began to recount what happened next to Mana Biben.